Hello, everyone. Welcome to our inaugural Konvoy Rocket Science Game Developer Survey Insights webinar. Thank you all for joining. I'm Jackson Vaughn. I'm a managing partner here at Konvoy. We're a venture firm. We're focused on the gaming industry. We invest in platforms, tools, technologies, infrastructure, and the picks and shovels of gaming. We focus on seed and Series A startups. So, if you're building in this space, please reach out. We'd love to get to know you. I'm also co-hosting here, right, with Brian Corrigan, who's the president of Rocket Science Group. And he's going to be leading a lot of the conversation today. Rocket Science is a game development partner for many top-tier studio publishers and developers across the world. Through the Rocket Science Group studios, they specialize in gameplay, UI, UX, engine work, servers, and back-end development, as well as BD, production, and creative work. Prior to Rocket Science, Brian has had a storied career in games. He was CTO at Agora Games, CTO of Major League Gaming, CEO of Mad Glory, which became part of PUBG in 2018, and he became VP and head of Americas for Krafton as well. I should note that Rocket Science is a Konvoy portfolio company, and Brian is also a Konvoy advisor. So now, sometime last year, our teams at Rocket Science and Konvoy got together and we decided we wanted to do a developer survey, which you all participated in. Again, thank you for contributing to that. It's much appreciated. As promised, we'll also be releasing our Amazon raffles to 3 lucky winners today. Now, with this survey, we wanted to focus on the tech that people are using across game engines, 3D modeling and animation, backend, analytics, UA and advertising, and what people are doing with AI across the board. Not only did we ask what people are actively using, but we wanted to hear what people were interested in using going forward, which gives us a better picture into what technologies are trending up and what's trending down. So we'll have a lot of insights into what tools are most popular today, what's admired, as in what are people using today and they want to continue using in the future? And then what is also desired? What are people not necessarily using today, but they're interested in using in the future? As for the survey demographics, what we have on the screen now, we had 155 respondents across a variety of studio sizes, ranging from indie solo developers up to AAA 100-person teams. We also had developers building for all platforms across PC, mobile, web, UGC, console, and VR and AR. Now, joining us for the discussion, we have our amazing panelists as well, Karthik Bala and Mark James. I'm going to read their bios because I want to make sure not to miss anything because they're really quite incredible. So Karthik, along with his brother, are founders of Valence Studios, an award-winning indie game studio focused on discovery of breakthrough new game experiences. Karthik has been making games for nearly 35 years on a wide range of platforms, spanning indie original IP to blockbuster entertainment franchises. As part of Valence Studios, he has contributed to the groundbreaking mixed reality experiences Mario Kart Live Home Circuit and Hot Wheels Rift Valley, the online multiplayer Dodge Brawler Knockout City, pinball reinvention in VR with Bounce Arcade, and the upcoming innovative social party game of hide and seek and shoot in the dark in Midnight Murder Club. Previously, Karthik and Guha co-founded Vicarious Visions in '91 while both were in high school. Over their 25-year leadership of the studio, Vicarious Visions grew to become an industry-leading game developer with products generating over $4 billion in sales, helping shape popular culture around the world. The brothers have built and led teams in the development of multi-billion-dollar franchises such as Skylanders, Guitar Hero, Crash Bandicoot, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, and more, some of my favorite games. In 2021, Vicarious Visions became part of Blizzard Entertainment. Now, Mark James. Mark is a seasoned technology executive with over 30 years of experience in the video game industry, renowned for his expertise leading multi-platform, cross-genre product development and fostering high-performance technical teams. Currently serving as the CTO at Endava Games, he drives the company's technology strategy, ensuring the seamless integration of cutting-edge solutions to enhance game development and commercial success. As the founder and CEO of Bottled Lightning Studios, Mark has provided consultancy and strategic guidance to the gaming industry for over a decade. His leadership extends to advisory roles at multiple companies, including Midwest Games and Axelbyte, where he has contributed to technology innovation, business development, and executive mentoring. Mark's career is marked by key leadership positions at major game studios, including his tenure as CTO at Striking Distance Studios, where he played a pivotal role in shaping the company's long-term technical vision. Prior to that, he served as VP of Technology at 2K, overseeing technology strategies that contributed to over 1.7 billion in sales across multiple franchises. His extensive experience also includes leadership roles at LucasArts, Zynga, and Sony Computer Entertainment Europe, where he played a crucial role in platform technology and external development management. As you can see, we are joined by panelists with a depth and breadth of experience that enables them to speak to the technology we're covering today. Mark and Karthik, thank you for joining us. With that, let's get into some of the data here, and I'm going to pass it to you, Brian, and our panelists, Karthik and Mark.
Yeah, boy, I'll tell you, if you want to look smart, you just bring people smarter than you, huh? Thanks for showing up, guys.
That's always been my trick.
Yeah, exactly. I would employ that guy. He sounds amazing.
I was just thinking, we've now known each other for almost 20 years. I went back and looked through my first email to both of you, and Karthik, I think it was somewhere in 2008, and Mark, I think it was 2011, maybe, or 10.
Yeah.
So it's been quite a while.
Nice.
Yeah. But yeah, let's start off with game engines. And you guys are both in the business of picking game engines and for the studios and the products you work on. What do you sort of see when you look at the slide? What sticks out to you? Karthik, how about you start us off there?
I would the obvious thing is the drop in interest in Unity. I'm sure that has something to do with like the loss of trust and the changes in their business model. But I believe this survey did take place a little bit after that, so it is interesting to see that drop, and then you conversely see the growth on the Godot and Game Maker side. Stride 3D is an interesting one that sort of surprised me. I can talk a little bit about that. Silicon Studio, who developed that engine, they used to be actually our Japanese partner on an older engine that we had licensed and that third parties were using. And so the great team and studio and pedigree. So in some respects, I'm not surprised to see the growth there. But the general trend is, I think it's not just about Unity and Unreal, and that there's like a broader set of options, and people want to have more control over their future and their tech stack.
Yeah. What do you guys see, Mark, when you're out there talking to customers and working with various teams these days?
I'm always in the belief is that your creative vision determines your engine choice. What do I want to achieve in my overall creative vision for the product? And that includes platform support, that includes monetization strategies. It's a wider gamut of what do I want to achieve. And that really, technology in the overall engine supports that vision. So, when everybody asks me about, what engine should I use? My next question is that, what do you want to achieve? It's like asking someone about what car should I buy? And I'm like, what's important to you? What's important, the performance? What's important, the look? Unreal does a great job in terms of look and visualization. So if that overall rendering fidelity is important to you, then that's a great engine choice. Maybe what's important to you is distribution on web platforms. So I'm like, well, I wouldn't choose Unreal to do that. Then I'd maybe choose some of the more web focused technologies. So I think as Karthik said, the drop in Unity was obvious. It was the lack of trust, and people really are starting to look at alternative open source engines. I'd say that Unity drop really moved into more of that open source. It's not going to change the AAA developer. They're still going to hit that Unreal group as because they normally have to hit console. But I think people are looking at more diversity, as Karthik said. It's not it's not about the one or the other now. It's about, well, what do I want to achieve as my product, and then what engine both fits that out there. And people are looking wider. They want to own their own technology stack sometimes as well, because they've been bitten by the big guys in terms of like support. So they're maybe looking at more kind of Godot or Game Maker in that, so they can actually own some of their own technology and the overall mechanisms. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, best choice there. The car buying model is the one I always stick with. And what do you want your engine to do?
I think, Mark,
Yeah.
on this point, I 100% agree with you.
Yep.
It really should be, what are you trying to sort of creatively, achieve? I think for quite some time, especially among indies, it was sort of, inertia. What are the other indies using, or what did I learn in school? And, and you just kind of became the default. And this is what I know, and making my game. But with just the volume of content out there, differentiation is key. And I'm looking at what you're doing creatively unique, and if a particular engine does what you need to hit those key creative pillars, then great. But otherwise, you gotta look at other options and stuff. And I think that's what we're going to see trending. Like the opportunity for more open source solutions are picking and choosing components,
Yeah.
of middleware to customize your needs and have great level of transparency, having access to the code
Yeah.
rather than being a black box is another kind of component. So, the needs are sort of more granular these
Yeah.
days, especially if you want to create games that are gonna stand out.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna have us move to the next slide too, because it tells the story a little more, I think. Thanks, Jackson. Yeah, so this is a little bit on your point about open source. And I think that's what this slide's calling out a little bit here, is that we're seeing some of the open source engines, I think seem like they're staying flat or picking up. I was a little surprised to see Three.js on there too. I guess I wouldn't really have, in some ways, considered that a game engine, but I do see a lot of people, you know, cranking out new games with this stuff on social media. Have you guys seen any of the sort of AI vibe coding cranking out Three.js based online games? It's kind of a fun phenomenon to watch.
Nice.
Yeah, pretty neat. But yeah, on this one, so it's again just showing Unity down a little bit. And I also wonder on this one myself, the way that we structured the survey, it was who used it this year and who wants to use it next year. So it's about intent, right? So some of this could be, hey, look, I'm looking for an alternative, but the question is whether they'll still fall back to, for instance, the same, Unity skills that they built up over the last, 2 decades almost. Or if they're shopping, or if they're like actually going to buy, I guess. Any thoughts on that one?
Well, see, this is the thing, you may dabble, you may have the aspirational interest, you may even like invest a few months into it. Whether they stick with it, that's going to be the core thing. So I would be really interested a year from now doing a similar survey on how many people actually transition out of a legacy engine, whatever they came from, to see
Yeah,
how much they transfer, because it's not just about the familiarity of the engine, but it's also just the rest of the ecosystem. That's the moat for all of these,
that is a big moat. That
and
is a big moat.
when you have ready access to plugins to, put stuff together and go to market fast, is a big benefit. So, I think this is great data, but we want to see if there's a long-term, change or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's hit the next slide. This talks a little bit about, um, 3D modeling and animation tooling. And, Mark, I know you guys, again, are making a lot of these selections and stuff and talking with teams about pipelines and the types of tools they use and helping them, become more optimized, things like that.
Yeah.
What sort of sticks out to you a little bit on this one?
So yeah, the one that actually sticks out to me is actually Houdini. So we're seeing a lot of what we say, procedural content generation, as being a lift for smaller teams, and
Mm,
actually lot of investment within the PCG space. And Houdini is a great tool for doing that, either as a making models or making kind of like individual decisions about what I want to use PCG for. So Houdini is a great tool for that. I also see a lot of the individual, let's call it IDE style, like the Unities and the Unreals of this world. More of this type of modeling and animation being done in those products. And that definitely was a big push for Epic in the last few years. They don't want you to exit the engine. They want you to stay in the engine. They want you to do your animation work in there instead of Maya. They want you to do your material work in there instead of Maya. So it's interesting to see, that's really, we've got Unity Pro Builder on there, but and when we've got some Epic, some there, but I see a lot of movement of stuff that's done in Unreal directly rather than pay for a license for Maya, pay for a license for Houdini. So there's a lot of push towards staying in that one place as your game development engine rather than actually move out of that space. And that actually makes things in performance wise way closer to the actual engine than it does to worry about building something outside in a DCC tool and then worrying about that being performant once I migrate that in.
Yeah, Epic has really done a good job in the last few years on acquisitions and integrating new tools. I mean, they've changed that environment completely, really, in the last 3, 4 years, I would say.
Absolutely. There was a time I wouldn't consider animating in Unreal, but now it's a viable alternative.
Yeah,
I find
and
it interesting that the lines are blurring between like some of the DCCs and real-time engines, right? When you look at Blender, there's a couple of interesting things about Blender, but Blender, and it's like real-time rendering, push, and I mean, obviously it's being used a lot more for film, and there's great traction, there. But I do wonder, how long until like DCCs start opening up into becoming sort of game engines on their own, or at least
mm,
opening up avenues for transforming that as a base. Maybe if there's like entity component systems and other like core systems to make it a game engine, then
Yeah,
maybe.
unfortunately, as Karthik, you know that we've seen some failures there as well with
Oh yeah.
and the guys that really come from the DCC tool space, not really understanding the problem space well in engine. So yeah, I think it's more likely, what we're seeing is the other way is actually much more DCC tooling existing in traditional game IDEs rather than these guys move up. I think you can see clearer integrations in there with actually the controlling mechanism being Unreal or Unity, and then having these real kind of like extensions around some of these. So I think I'll predict it. I'd say there'll be a Maya extension to Unreal. There'll be a Maya, so it'll be utilizing some of the space, but it'll be an extension of the engine.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting when Adobe and Autodesk and these bigger players in the DCC space start seeing market share loss because of a lot of usage is now built right into the game engines, and how that might be disruptive, or it might actually open up some interesting M&A. Because like, again, to Epic's credit, and even Unity to a certain extent, is like through M&A they've been able to integrate um, a bunch of other sort of pieces. So I actually think that the landscape is going to just shift overall. I do I do find it curious that as much as we see that growth in Houdini, which is awesome, these high-end PCG tools that were really in AAA and film actually becoming more accessible and taken in by the indies that are seeing the benefit. That's a great thing to see. Curious as to why there was a drop in interest in Blender, honestly,
yeah, what's
because
going on there?
anecdotally and like even internally in my studio, it's 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 going the other way, because it's like it's giving Maya a run for its money on a lot of, sort of functionality and the rapid prototyping and stuff that we can do from a visual design, in Blender, and actually use it for key parts of the pipeline. So I'd be curious to see if that sort of thing sticks, or if there's like very specific reasons where it's falling short of the promise, um, and if they're going to address it. So that's going to be one to watch, I think.
Last year, I think, was the year 4.0 came out for Blender, the new version, right? Pretty major upgrade. Yeah, so I was surprised to see this too, because for at least from what I saw, generally well received, like really well received.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and then yeah, looking at some of the kind of like material based like Photoshop drop and things like that, I think that really points to the high availability of library resources now.
Hmm.
Yeah, I really can. I look at like yeah the Quixel stuff that from Epic. I mean, like yeah, I get to the point where I'm never making a material. I'm never having to go into Photoshop. Yeah, the library is huge there. And so I think, yeah, as we see more and more availability of high quality resources, we're going to see less use of this tooling around that material creation.
The other thing on Adobe, at least, again, this is more anecdotal than anything else. I think there's been a drop in trust there among artists, and especially independent artists when it comes to the push into AI. And we'll be talking about that at the end around AI and games, which is kind of fascinating as an industry compared to some of the other industries that are wholeheartedly embracing it.
Mhm.
Um, but but some of the licensing term changes hasn't sit well with artists in this sense that Creative Cloud is like taking all your work and using it for training. The sort of boogeyman specter, I don't know if that has anything to do with I mean, it's a large drop there on Adobe products, 41 to 17. It seems, I agree with you that it's a library and other means of getting to your results, but I think the trust factor in the last year has had a big impact from what I've
Yeah,
seen.
completely agree. Yeah, like that's the bigger drop in Adobe products. I mean, they've really, much like we saw in the Unity backlash, we're seeing that backlash within the Adobe product because of that, yeah, use of creators' work within training AI models. I think there's a very passionate community around that not happening.
Just shows you how hard it is to like build up a community of users and how easy it is to lose them.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. Let's hit the next one, Jackson. Oh, back-ended engineering. So close to my heart, anyways. Um, Mark, actually, why don't you take a swing at this one too? There's, you've been in
Yeah,
this space too,
yeah,
obviously, and you've got a lot of connection here.
yeah, a lot of connection here with the Excel byte work and things as well. We're still seeing an incredible amount of grow your own in this space.
Yeah,
Yeah, like way more than I thought. I thought there would be some market consolidation at this point, with some big players standing out. But unfortunately, I think every time there's a big player, and you know this, Brian, they tend to get bought by a larger entity and then kind of
that's
destroyed
right.
by that entity. So
Yeah,
so. And we saw this with PlayFab and yeah, lots of people
sure.
are yeah as they're bought as they're successful, they get absorbed and then they become less supporting of those smaller studios. So then the smaller studios go back to more of their own tech stacks, and then they start to build out their own tech stacks again. So we're seeing this as well about yeah some of the uses of this space. We were involved on a very successful title of the last year on Helldivers 2. And that's a studio that want to control their own technology, want to control their own back-end space, and want to be very reactive to a live service problem. And I think that's what's important in this space, being able to reactive to a live service, reactive to your community within your underlying technology that supports your backend. And so we see some of the larger players not being very reactive to individual product problem space. So those studios want to own their own backend and own their own tech stacks.
Yeah, and
It's interesting. So Helldivers actually, are you saying you guys helped work on that backend? You guys built the custom backend for Helldivers? I don't know what system they're using.
We
I usually
worked on
know.
we didn't
Yeah,
help build that. We helped solve the problem space
got
with
it.
their
Cool.
launch.
Yeah,
Um,
amazing game,
so um,
obviously.
so that was a good thing. Yeah, we stopped that live service problem which everybody runs into. Yeah, it's actually more of an exception when people don't run into a live service problem at launch.
Yep.
Yeah, building for scalability, building for success is actually very hard to do and model. Even at 2K, we used to run lots of open, I'll say betas with my strange accent. But like we used to run a lot of those, and it was very hard to model the type of connections you're going to see in live service. And so a lot of the space that we get involved in and Endava is really firefighting on those very real problems where you're losing connections or losing consumers on a live service. That was our involvement, and we've continued to help Arrowhead optimize their live service delivery. Because the other thing is that once you're a successful game, you are feeding the beast. Yeah, you are making content as fast as you can to feed that beast. And a lot of people on their back end services and their live services, it's not built for high grade iteration. So that is something we're seeing across a lot of successful live service studios. They don't have the machine to feed content. So it
Mm,
goes back into, we're talking about back-end technologies here, but it really starts to look into your overall procedures for creating content quickly, gets into that PCG space and some of those tooling there, because you need to deliver that content on a weekly basis. Otherwise, that community will go somewhere else.
I mean, the hard thing
cor-
there is that you gotta like make those decisions early on in the architecture of the game and the development. And when you don't even know whether you're going to be successful or whether you
Yep.
even got a fun game yet. And so
Yes.
then you're in this stuck position of kind of rebuilding or tearing down and reworking it while while all of this is in motion,
that is not easy.
which is
No,
not easy at
no,
all. And like,
no.
and those that can do that, or they had the foresight, for scalability, they do well. I actually have a question for the two of you on this slide, because this is the backend services is not my background, but the head scratcher for me was always um, the business model. It can create a lot of value, which is why there's been a lot of M&A by bigger companies in the space, but it's kind of a weird thing where these sort of, I'll call them like plug and play services, or they advertise them to be very easy to integrate and use, and to some extent they may be. It's great when you're small, where you kind of need to just have an analytics backend or other component before you're successful. And then once you do find that success and scale, you need more control, you need more transparency. It can't be a black box. It needs to be super flexible to change, and adapt. And there can't be a barrier between you and your customers. And if these pieces sit there as a potential barrier, it kind of works against you. So if you find that level of success, you're actively working on replacing it,
Right.
with something that you do have control over. Yet these companies, their business model, like from a SaaS standpoint, is they don't make money on the small stuff. It's only when it's at scale.
Yep.
So other than selling to a bigger player, and then like the founders and the people who architected it, who are really smart, they get out. And then all of a sudden the value drops in the product as part of a bigger company. I don't see how this business works. I just have a hard time getting my head around it.
I mean, Over the years, they never have worked. As you know, there's probably been a dozen and a half, almost 2 dozen attempts over the years, and you can just like start at the beginning and look at Quazzle or
Yeah.
PlayFab or GameSparks or GameSpy, or just go right on up through history and take them all. It's funny, and I think it's true for a lot of the stuff on back end, not just the platform stuff. Sometimes even the server scalers. My co-founder, you guys all know Tom here, but Tom always says at Unity Multiplay, we were a silent co-investor in every one of our customers. You know, they put in a ton of time. There's no revenue coming out. Once in a while, you have a customer who gets really successful, and then, as you mentioned, Karthik, they end up with price control essentially over you, price leverage over you. And if they get big enough, it makes sense to either buy you or replace you. So, but bunch of challenges there, I think. But I will say there is some innovation, I think, going on right now in the way that the service is offered. So, for example, the Pragma guys think of themselves more like licensing code. And I believe last I knew you could actually run it yourself if you wanted to. Now there's still a license, and I think there's still a CCU license. So from a business model perspective, it still has the same challenges. But if you look across the board, they all work a little differently. Excel Byte, a little more like an API, a little less need to write code. Pragma, a little more like code, and they'll handle operations, and they write a lot of the common services for you. But Loot Locker, maybe a little more like Pragma, a little more mobile focused.
Yeah.
There's Beamable's doing something with Web3, as everybody probably saw John announced a couple weeks ago. Just raised some money. So I think there's a little bit of variability, and I think yesterday I saw a big announcement for a company called Spacetime DB that looks quite interesting too. And they're trying to model the entire problem as a database, period, which looks really interesting to me because it's the first time I think I've seen something new in the space in decades. But Mark, what do you think? What do you want to throw on that?
Yeah, I think much like an investment model. Let's compare it that way. Is that you've got to look at where if your product is successful, how do I exit my provider? Yeah, because you do want to be close to the consumer. You do want to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So you might start with a hosting model, an extended model, where I'm building some of my services, but I'm using 90% in a hosting services model. So if I'm successful, I do want to start running that myself. I do want to know where all of the bells and whistles and knobs and levers and all those kind of fun things are within my backend service. So what's my exit plan? Build your exit plan into your product. Think of how do I run that? How do I get that services? Do I have an ability to own that code? Do I have an ability to run that on my own infrastructure? All these things are like looking at those success models and building that into your product release, because often I find the alleyway problem, right? I've built myself into this model. I'm a hugely successful game, and now suddenly I can't scale fast enough, and that takes a couple of weeks and you're gone. And that's a terrible thing to say, but that's the truth. That marketplace will move on if they have a server issue with your game, or a login issue, or something else in terms of cheating. They will just move on from your game because there's plenty of other people out there that will vie for their time. So this is so important in terms of live operations, to make sure there's adequate planning for success. And unfortunately, I don't see that enough in the industry. It's great for me because I get to come in and solve that for people. But there's not enough planning around successful live service models.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Brian, can
I wanted to call
actually,
if you think. Oh, go ahead, Jackson.
Yeah, no, I just had a question to Mark on that. In terms of studio sizes, right? There's obviously some cost to doing that, right? Thinking through that exit plan and managing and building for that exit plan. Do you have any advice for different studio sizes and when they should start thinking about that exit plan?
Yeah. I think a good quality, and it's nice. Brian talked about investment, because for some of these companies, and I'll talk from an Excel Byte point of view, you're investing in the success of their products. You're successful when they're successful. I think a really good quality provider in this space is also trying to help you in that planning. They're trying to help you in your success model. Sometimes that will mean moving away from them, but they still want to help you in your success model to get you to that point. And so I think a really good partner in this space, and I look across this entire slide, works with those smaller developers in mapping out their success model.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
as a developer who builds online multiplayer games and looks at these third-party services, when we have that sort of build versus buy kind of discussion internally, and we're talking to partners, we are looking at that success case very carefully and how they react when we say, all right, listen, if we have this situation, do we have recourse? Do we have access to source code? Is there a licensing agreement where we could just take it and run with it and integrate if we wanted to, right? And if there's a huge amount of resistance around that, it's usually correlated with declining value as your success grows. But if the conversation is actually like, well, here are other ways that we can create value to compete against you walking away, and we're going to give you a path to walk away if you're not happy with us, that's a great indicator early on, for partnerships. When you're as a developer and you're like talking to them,
Yeah.
you should look for that in the early conversations, because this, just like we're just talking about not enough planning for scalability, this is an important part of scalability as a business and customers, because again, if it falls down and you don't, you're at the mercy, of these services, and you want to be able to, you're going to need more control. At the beginning, you want the consultation and support to get you
Yeah.
up and running as fast as possible. But then later on, when you do have success, you need greater control. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
important.
I completely agree. A lot of these people, they'll start on how do they make their money? They'll start on an infrastructure plus model. So like, hey, I'm going to build you a management service that sits on top of an AWS, and it's that infrastructure plus model. That's how they make their money. I think migrating to success means you need to sometimes change that model into more of a software services model. I'm then building the thing you need to build for you. I'm building I'm working with your team about migrating management of that service. So a really good partner in this space starts in that infrastructure plus model, but has the capability of moving to software services.
Yeah. I will say, if you look at the ones who are going up, and I know we need to kind of move on here a little bit, but you see Heroic Labs, which is an open source project. So you can see why that makes a lot of sense and aligns with what you're saying. You see Xolo, which is really about billing and global payments.
Yes.
And that's probably the web store, influence going on. Everybody's thinking about that. And, you also see GameLift and EdgeGap a little bit. And, both of those guys now, are giving you some flexibility where your servers are running. GameLift announced last year you can run on your own cloud. Even you can leverage existing infrastructure, which makes it a lot easier to adopt GameLift as a AAA, I think, at this point, because if you've invested in data centers like some of them have, it's just an easier control plane for your existing stuff. I mean, it's just going to save you money. And everybody bursts in the cloud anyway. So, there's a bit of a trend there, I think, with more control, more flexibility, a little bit of open source on at least the three of those.
Yeah, I just to add to that, a lot of people don't think about the life cycle of live service as well. Having the capability of move to internal infrastructure at the end of life of a product is just as important at the beginning of life
Yeah,
of a product. So
that's true.
at Zynga, my time at Zynga, we spent a lot of time modeling the infrastructure between internal and external services. And then working out the best time to migrate some of these mobile titles internally once they've gone through their success loop externally. So that was I'm constantly thinking, am I running in the best place? Am I running in the best place in my infrastructure services outside of my software services stack?
Yep. Yep. Let's hit the next one, Jackson. Yeah, that's a good point. Cool. So analytics, again, you guys are kind of both having to think through this decision, but you see a drop in Google Analytics and game analytics and Unity Analytics, mostly the same, but a rise in mixed panel. So, Karthik, any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I do question. Um, well, let's put it this way, at least from our perspective, um, the drop in Google Analytics and all that, it's like again, it goes back to the value part of the equation, like
Mm,
new value is it providing, and we're moving away from those. I'm not surprised at the growth and interest in mixed panel, but again, this is also a space where it's very hybridized with a lot of internal tech,
yeah,
because of where you're going after. It will be interesting to see. At the end of the day, it's more about insights rather than the data collection and like ways in which you're getting your insights. And this is the piece I'm actually eager to see with AI tools being able to mine that data, much more rapidly. Because sometimes I ask questions to our analytics team, and they'll come back a week later,
yeah. See you in a week.
later. It's like, well,
Yeah,
if I can get that question answered like right now, it's like, well, we didn't quite have the hookups to get that done. Or, oh,
took a
we
whole
do have
push,
the
new
hookups and we have
build.
the inference and we got to like jump through lots
Yeah,
of SQL hoops and in order to be able to provide it. I think that's actually where the value is going to really grow, as opposed to some of the underlying plumbing, which is
yeah.
highly commoditized at this point.
Mark, is that what you're seeing as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I always like a lot of people like start this thinking, what's my telemetry look like? What should I store?
Right.
What should I
Yeah,
capture? And no one thinks about how I'm using it. How am I going to use that data? What questions do I need to answer? I say the best analytics is like starting from the question and then working out what to store to answer the question. So I see completely the same. I would say at Endava, we're building custom GPTs to answer this question. Yeah, we're actually taking performance data from frames and getting GPT to analyze that data for problem space because
yeah,
it's a large data model problem. And one thing ML is great at is chewing through large amounts of data quickly and recognizing patterns within that data that match patterns for output. So I'm basically describing an ML problem. So I'm really surprised that we're not seeing more of these types of tools in this, and maybe people don't categorize them as an analytics tool, but these are great at doing this. I can chew through a frame data out of Unreal. I can chew through that in seconds with a custom GPT. That used
yeah,
to take an engineer a day. And that would point to a space where, hey, you're rendering too many of these objects, or hey, you're spending a lot of setup time in your loop here. Does this need to be done every frame? So getting that conversational aspect into a GPT that's been built for custom analysis of your data, I think that's the route forward.
yeah. That's interesting. Agreed. We keep touching on the AI thing. Let's actually hit the next slide because I think we're gonna have a little fun with this one. Uh, oh, sorry, that's the one after this one. But on the UA slide here, um, I mean, really two standout trends. First of all, it seems like everyone hates most UA tools since everyone wants to use them all less. But you see Tension and Branch, going up quite a lot. Any thoughts on that one too, Mark? I'll throw it to
Um,
Karthik next.
I think it's interesting enough that we're seeing, and I'll point to experimentation in monetization models.
Yeah. Mm,
People want to, and I'll use my cake analogy, they want to deliver a cake, but they want to consume it in very different ways. So this is people looking at and I'd say the death of the $60 model, and going, well, how do I diversify my consumption of that and are looking at ways like Netflix, as an example. I can consume Netflix in multiple different ways. I can ad support Netflix, I can pay and never see an ad again, and there's every type of gray in between those. I think the people, this is really looking at UA and advertising tools as more tooling around diversification of consumption models. And I think that's what I'm seeing here. More people used to be like, oh, I'm never going to touch ads. It sullies the experience and all those kind of things. I think people will say, hey, I actually get some play space in my game for this consumption method. And people are looking at maybe there's a full price consumption method, maybe there's a pay as you play consumption method, maybe there's an ad supported consumption method. So I think this is more about supporting those within your product. And I think diversity of consumption is what we're going to see with more and more of the new games that are being created now.
I think the
It's
other,
funny. I think
go ahead,
I was going to
Ryan.
say I was just going to say UA has like probably never been harder than it is right now in
Yeah,
2025, right?
absolutely.
And I mean that's what I was going to tee up for, Karthik. Is just like
Uh,
what do you see when you look at this one? It's
yeah,
never been
look, I
harder.
mean, it's incredibly difficult and like, you know,
Yeah.
mobile IDFA and all of that. The landscape has changed quite a bit, and it is very difficult for new IP and new products to be able to, cut through the noise. You're seeing
Mm,
the big sort of mobile games just build their moats and their audiences and the incremental, UA, they just suck it up. And so I'm not surprised at seeing more breadth in options because it used to be just a default, oh, Google Ads or Unity ads built into my Unity product, check the box and go.
yeah.
It really comes down to the quality of users, not necessarily like a volume play, like who's got the most reach, but quality of users you get for the kind of product that you're making. And so what I'm seeing, amongst developers that they're looking at their competitive set and like what are the services that they're using? Where's the audience for this sort of genre or subgenre, that I can target so that my precious UA spend is going to have the best conversion rate possible and it's the quality of users, not total, volume, of users. And so the services and stuff that happen to tap into that or where audiences naturally have, kind of congregated, that becomes the service of choice for your product. So even if you're a studio that has made multiple games, it doesn't mean you stick with the same providers based on the product you're making.
I'd say one thing to add in that's surprise here is that I see UGC platforms, Roblox, UEFN, as a user acquisition model. I know a number of developers that have started in that space to acquire an audience because that is where audiences are in majority. And we've seen those audiences growing in the UGC space over the last couple of years. They acquire the audience there and then migrate once they have that audience into other platforms. So user acquisition, go to where the users are. Yeah, like go to where these UGC spaces are, where the audience is used to sampling, is used to kind of like following content, and go there and then try and build on a monetization model outside of there. The great thing about, and I will use Roblox as an example, they support multiple monetization models. So I can even test out my monetization in those user acquisition models as well. So it's very surprising is what I'm not seeing here is people seeing UGC as a user acquisition model.
I think we're going to see more
Yeah.
of that, but I think the big thing to prove out is whether you can migrate that audience.
Yeah.
The game itself is so powerful in the content that they're willing to migrate out of the place that their friends are, from that platform. And, the metrics. And the other thing to be very careful of is like the KPIs that you're seeing within the platform. You may not be able to replicate the same, same numbers outside of the platform. So I think it's a TBD. I think it's a very exciting thing.
Yeah.
And if that can actually be proven to be sustainable, it'll be a growth engine for developers because the economics and the black box nature of it is not favorable to developers,
Yeah,
at any scale. And so I
yeah.
think it's it's to be proven.
Yeah,
We tried to do this at PUBG when you and I were both
yeah,
sort of
yeah.
with Crafted, if you remember, Mark. And I think that was our problem at the time is getting the game experience up and live was fine. It wasn't even really going to cost that much money. It was mostly how do we measure conversion? How do we actually convert people over to the main game? Because that's what we wanted to do. And really, I mean, Roblox kind of actively prevents this right now,
They
probably
do.
for good reason. So, because that's what everybody wants. Uh, yeah.
Yeah,
Let's move on to the AI topic here, if you guys don't mind, only because we only have a few minutes left, and I know we've mentioned it a few times, but this one actually surprised me. I was actually surprised to see everyone saying they're interested in using this less, and I wonder if it's because the tooling's not there, or it's just stigma still on AI, which of course I understand. There's a lot of issues with that, ethical issues, or or just maybe they tried things and it doesn't work. What was the read, for you on this one, Karthik? Prepare
Uh,
to jump into a loaded topic.
yeah, I think multiple dynamics at play, maybe there's a little bit of a trough of disillusionment, at this
Yeah,
point. Um, from sort of personal experience and looking at it, uh, from the expectation to reality,
very different.
there's quite a bit of a difference there. A lot of it has to do with the lack of control once you have something, right? Because you're not talking about finished frames of work that's just ready to publish, in a way. You want to actually have all the building blocks that you can then modify and have transparency. The tooling side for that hasn't caught up with like this initial wow, that might be there. And I think developers are finding that to be the case, and it's extremely challenging. It's not surprising to see it being tried in very bespoke parts of the development process that's not interconnected, and very few people are willing to take the dive into the things that might be interconnected horizontally across the development pipeline, because that's very risky and there's a lot of work there. Um,
Mm,
I'm surprised that the sort of the game development, and design portion has dropped that much. It could be the tool barrier. One of the things that we're experimenting with. So we primarily use our own internal engine that we call Viper, and it's got its own custom scripting language, and there's huge advantages to it. But one of the challenges is you got to learn it. It's not C sharp and so on. And so we have a TypeScript version, but we also have a visual script akin to Blueprint, but it's as fast as C, and so it's very powerful. And so we're opening up accessibility. Where we see a potential use uh, is um, is actually how it aids in game scripting, and
mm.
but it generates the code that you can then modify because it's not always going to be right. It may give you 80% of the way there. There are helper tools. So I think things are going to get more nuanced in terms of the areas where there's like, high value use. It is not surprising to see QA and some of these other like practical uses where it's like, yeah, it's not high value to throw humans at it, and there's a piece of QA engineering that could be done here. Um, the piece that I
Yeah,
think is untapped, and we talked about it, is actually on the analytics and insights side that's not being used, and it seems like one of the most obvious areas to go to, actually more so than art and all that stuff. And this whole like live ops content thing that you get buried into, that's another
that's another one
huge
for
opportunity
sure. Yeah,
to point it at, because I don't know of any developer who truly enjoys cranking out content, for live ops. I haven't met a single one. It's like the
well,
joy of
and
building
there's a lot
the
of art
experience.
outsourcing for, or just outsourcing for that. And imagine you could
No,
bring it back in the studio, right? So that would be nice too
you
for
can, and if it's
velocity.
if it's
Man,
trained on your data set, and this is the other piece of it, we're finding there's the training has to be done on such a large data set
Yeah.
where we get into all the ethical issues. If it can train on your data set, which is much more modest in terms of size, and get good
Mm.
results, right? This is sort of the next evolution, of AI to be training on smaller data sets. But it's like if you're able to do that and point it at like the groundwork that nobody really likes, I think we're going to see a tremendous amount of value.
Mark, what do you think? Big topic.
Yeah, it's a big topic. I agree. I already said my kind of analytics piece as well. But yeah, like concentrating. Stop thinking about AI just for PCG. Stop thinking about this, for AI for iterative crate modeling and things like that. Start thinking about AI being used for large data set problems. Like start thinking about that for QA testing, optimization, performance. We're seeing those as well. That's what it's good at. Good at it. AI is great, and these ML models are great at crunching large amounts of data and looking for pattern analysis. That's what they're built for. So having those as assistants within your overall design, that's great. We are seeing a lot of personalization. About live services. I want to play that game in that way. I want a personalized experience within my live service model. How do I deliver content which is more personal to that player or player group, and optimize that for what I'm seeing in play spaces in there? So, hey, I want to deliver more quest content that comes out because of people are chewing through quests more of way faster than I can create them. Hey, let's build something which actually can automate my quest production. Like, so that type of iterative, personalized modeling is what AI should be used for. I think we are concentrating too much on pre-production for AI space and not looking at the stuff which it's really good at, which is actually the end process and live service modeling, QA there. We're using it for penetration testing on Mac.
Mm.
Like, that's a really good example. Like QA hate doing that work. They hate having to run around and looking for gaps and fall throughs and things like that. Just
Back
get,
testing.
yeah, just get a bot.
It's the worst.
It's
Yeah.
way faster at doing it.
Yeah.
It can actually generate those paths for you. It can actually even manage combat situations if you want to, if that's part of the thing you want to test. Take away that 70% of work that QA guys don't want to do. Give them the stuff that's interesting problem space. Give them the stuff that they actually enjoy doing.
Mark, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think it's like, just as a generalized comment,
Mm.
you know, what I'm seeing, at least in games versus other industries, we've had a real allergic reaction to
Yeah,
AI because of the ethical issues and stuff around art, and you know, and
Sound creative.
rightfully
Yeah.
so, and so the adoption hasn't been sort of full force embracing it. I think there's value as a tool, and it is a tool. And I think if we can show use cases and really talk about them, and then here's an opportunity for service providers,
yeah,
is to build those practical components that are for work that nobody wants to do. And
yeah,
it's like,
yeah,
it's
Yeah.
that's the
And
key
there's a lot
thing.
of that.
There's a ton.
There's a ton of that.
There's
There's a
a
ton of toil.
ton.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
it's not and allow uh, developers to focus on the most creative portions,
Yeah.
and if we could do that, I think you're going to see a really large swing. This is a declining interest, and it's like, it's the again, this trough of disillusionment, but
yeah,
it's also, is it really creating value for me? It's
yeah.
like, if
Yeah.
it's not, you're gonna see that drop. I think we're pointing AI at
At the
largely
wrong space.
set of problems,
Yeah,
and for this industry, and I think if we point it at the right stuff of like what It's not about like, replacing jobs. It's the stuff that nobody wants to do, and you get huge pickup, in terms of production efficiency and um, production budgets, because you don't see the cost of that when you've got lots of bugs and other things. You're fixing it afterwards. It's never tracked. Why does it cost so much? Why does live ops cost so much? And then these are the kinds of things that I think you can take preventative measures on. That's the big opportunity.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, yeah, change the focus. Yeah, look at the tail end of the game development. Look at scaling problems. Look at, like, those are the problems that are gonna need great AI accelerators. I don't need that much. Once I've got to 20 versions of my art asset, I'm not going to use that anymore. Like, that's great. That's all I need. So look at the way in which I have iterative content delivery on live service. Look at my big QA problems. Look at data analysis, telemetry analysis. They're the problem spaces that AI is gonna be great at, and no one a developer wants to do.
Guys, I'm gonna cut in only because it's 12:02 East Coast time, and I need to throw it back to Jackson, or I'm gonna be in trouble. So back to you, buddy.
No, this is great. This is awesome. But yes, it is a wrap for us because we're out of time here. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you to Karthik and Mark for sharing, these insights today. I think it was incredibly fun conversation from my end. Brian and I and the entire team at Konvoy and Rocket Science are incredibly appreciative. As a reminder to all the participants, check your emails. There's 3 of you who are going to be receiving a $100 Amazon gift card raffle rewards, so definitely check your emails for that. We'll also be releasing these slides and a number of other interesting data that we dug into and sliced and diced from the survey, but didn't have time to get to, obviously, on this webinar. So those will hit your emails later this week. And in that email, you'll also have the opportunity to provide feedback or requests for data you'd like in our next survey. With that, we'll close. And thank you all so much for joining and participating.